So here we have an absolute value equation, and you might think this is fairly straightforward to solve, at least if you're used to factoring equations to solve them, because I think this looks fairly familiar. If you think about this, remember how to factor simple equations like x squared minus 3x minus 40 equals 0? This isn't difficult. We know we can just turn this into a pair of binomials multiplied together. And if you're used to factoring, these numbers should just pop out at you. You need two numbers that multiply to 40, but they add up to negative 3. And that's going to be negative 8 and positive 5. They multiply to negative 40, but they add up to negative 3. So you would take this equation and then you would say, okay, well, this parentheses means x equals 8, and this parentheses means x equals negative 5. And we could go into more depth on that, but I think that's review for most people. Where it gets tricky in this problem, and this is actually an interesting application of absolute values, is you have to remember these are not x. These are not x variables. These are absolute value of x. So if you go through here and you add the absolute value to this equation, what changes? What effect does this have? Okay, these are all absolute value of x. So absolute value of x equals 8. What does that mean about x? X can be two numbers now, not just 8, but it could also be negative 8 because the absolute value of negative 8 is also 8. So this one leads us to this. X equals plus or minus 8, because either of those two answers, plus or minus 8, when you take the absolute value of it, leads you to x equals 8. The other one, absolute value of x equals negative 5. Well, think about that for a moment. The absolute value of something always must be positive. So how would you ever get the absolute value of something equals a negative number? The answer is you wouldn't. This does not exist. This is DNE, does not exist. So one part of this is a perfectly good solution, x equals plus or minus 8. The other part of it is a failed solution. So you only have one possible answer here, plus or minus 8. Even though you see there's all sorts of other answers to choose from. 8 and negative 5. Is that in here? That isn't in here, but 8 and 5 were in here, negative 8 and negative 5, plus or minus of each one. That's a popular choice because you think, oh, absolute values, that means I get both sides. But that's not quite true. This one takes a little bit of caution when dealing with those absolute value signs. Save it for the end, just treat it like a variable. The variable is absolute value of x. And then at the end, you think about whether or not these things can really exist, because some of them might not.